Yep, I can maneuver the slides as well. So we're all good.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, it is 3:10, so we will get started. Welcome back, everyone. Our topic today is responsible authorship and publications, and our lecturer is Dr. Maureen Lichtfeld. Dr. Lichtfeld has more than 35 years of experience in environmental public health. She began her career working as a physician in the Amazon rainforest. She later worked at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, where she led the agency's extramural prevention research program. Here at Tulane, she is a professor and the Freeport-McMoran Endowed Chair of Environmental Policy in the School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine. She serves as the director of the Center for Gulf Coast Environmental Health Research, Leadership, and Strategic Initiatives. Dr. Lichtfeld's national and global environmental health research has examined environmentally induced disease, health disparities, environmental health policy, disaster preparedness, public health systems, and the cumulative impact of chemical and non-chemical stressors on communities facing environmental health threats. Dr. Lichtfeld is a member of the National Academy of Medicine, a member of the Johns Hopkins University Society of Scholars, and a past member until May of 2020 of the National Advisory Environmental Health Sciences Council of the NIEHS. She serves on the National Academy of Sciences Board on Global Health and the One Health Action Collaborative, the National Academy of Medicine's Planning Committee on Climate and Health, the National Academy of Sciences Committee on Best Practices for Assessing Mortality and Significant Morbidity Following Large-Scale Disasters, the Advisory Committee for the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine's Climate Communications Initiative, the Board of the Consortium of Universities for Global Health, the Caribbean Expert Panel on Climate and Health as its chair, the National Academy of Sciences Roundtable on Environmental Health Sciences, Research, and Medicine, the Board of the Hispanic Serving Health Professions Schools, the Johns Hopkins School of Nursing Advisory Board, and the EPA Scientific Advisory Board and the CDC's Health Disparities Subcommittee until 2018. Dr. Lichtfeld is recognized nationally and internationally for her scholarly contributions to the field of public health. She has received many awards, including the CDC's Environmental Health Scientist of the Year, and has been named twice as the Woman of the Year by the City of New Orleans for her contributions to science. She has authored more than 135 peer-reviewed publications and has served on the editorial board of numerous peer-reviewed journals, including the American Journal of Public Health, where she served 2 terms as chair of the editorial board. Dr. Lichtfeld holds a BS in biology from the Mr. Dr. J.C. de Miranda Lyceum in Suriname, an MPH in environmental health sciences from Johns Hopkins University, and an MD from the University of Suriname. I ask that you please welcome Dr. Lichtfeld, and we turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. And I'm eager to engage in a conversation and a dialogue with everyone on online in Zoom. I'm looking forward to not just having a dry lecture, but really be engaging with you. So please feel free to stop at any time and ask questions. You can use the chat box to do that as well. And of course, we'll have time during discussion. So I'm ready to start, Liz, if we're okay to do so. And so today's presentation is about responsible authorship and publications, a set of rules. We talk about rules. We'll talk about tips specifically for students, graduate students, and junior scientists, and some strategies. And so one of the things that I also want to do is to teach you how to do a presentation. So you always begin a presentation with what you're intending your audience to know. And so what you're promising to your audience. So I'm promising to you that we will discuss authorship assignments and responsibilities that we will share, that I will share with you, key publishing rules, that together we'll identify some tips for selecting a journal for you to publish, and lastly, to examine some successful publication strategies. So determining authorship, the first question you need to ask, and you need to ask it boldly as the first author, is there a significant contribution to one or more of the following? Is your study design really well developed? Is it unique? Is it not in draft, but do you really have a good grasp of what your study protocol looks like? Are your methods solid? Is your data analysis plan well developed? Not that you're making it up as you go. Is your proposed publication well written? Well written not only technically, but well written scientifically as well. Have you gone through many revisions? Often students ask me, but this is already the 5th time I'm revising this. Get used to it. You know, when I was at CDC, we put a number on the number of revisions because sometimes we had 34 revisions for the same manuscript. Get used to revisions. And then, are you really solid in your final publication? And I really want to encourage you, particularly students and junior scientists, postdocs, it's totally okay for you to ask whether an author qualifies according to the requirements of the journal. And so I'll come back to that in a little bit more detail. You want to begin to ask, are there conflicts of interest? Are the conflicts of interest related to the author, or are there conflicts of interest relating to your funding support? Let's say I get funding support from the Beer X company. I live on Carondelet. Let's say I get support for my funding of my study from the Carondelet beer brewery. Now, the focus of my study is about proving that drinking Carondelet beer will improve students' grades by 10 points. Now, you see there is a conflict of interest there, correct? So be sure that you're monitoring that and fulfilling the requirements of the journal. So let's talk about authorship. What is the rank of the authors? It is really important to determine the rank order. The rank order is not something that you make up because you like a person. The rank order is solely based on who is contributing most. So as a student or a junior faculty, if this is your work, truly your work, then you are the first author, not the chair of your dissertation committee. The chair of your dissertation committee or your lead investigator then becomes the last author as the senior author. Who is the second author? The second author, when you see a designation of the second author, it typically means the person who has done a lot, if not most of all of the work. And so the second author is really an important position. And the last author, as I mentioned before, is typically your senior author. In between, there are a number of other authors. The investigator who helps you with the statistics plan, another one who analyzed your samples, and so there are those that have contributed and have written. Not only that they did a part of it, but they actually have contributed to the writing or to the design or to the review or to the analysis plan. And so you need to be able, more and more journals are asking you to document what it is that author has done before an article is accepted. Make sure that there are also people, well, before I say that, you also, in addition to the rank order of authors, you also have to identify who the corresponding author is. Typically, the corresponding author is the first author, meaning you. And then there are acknowledgements. There is an opportunity, and there are instances where a person or persons or a group might not have contributed to the paper itself, so has written, but were really instrumental. For example, if someone helped you with the English editing, then that's a person who you would acknowledge. But there is no room, obviously, for ghostwriting, that somebody wrote it for you and then you take the credit. Also acknowledging is always the funding support, and there's specific language for you to include as the funder. So as I mentioned before, there is no honorary authorship just because I liked you, or you could sit in my office, or you know, once I wrote a letter of support for you. That doesn't qualify as authorship. So the get my name on the paper demand does not exist. It's also important to ask and to verify how many authors a journal will allow. Sometimes you see journal articles have 30+ authors, and sometimes you see journal articles who have 4 or 5 authors. Typically, most journals will tell you how many are allowed, and if you want more, then you have to pay for that. So if you feel that you want to have 10 authors and the journal only allows for 6, then either you have to make the case why you need 4 more, or you have to pay for the extra, adding the extra authors. Publishing rules. By now I know that everyone knows what plagiarism is and what plagiarism can cause. Plagiarism can ruin your career. Often people think that self-plagiarism, so if I only cite myself, I'm not doing anybody's harm. No, that's also plagiarism. If you cite without, and if you quote without putting it in quotes, without citing a reference, that's plagiarism. And so make sure you're careful about that. We talked about your study design methods and data analysis being flawless, because that's the first thing that goes out of the window. That you include limitations and assumptions as key components of your discussion section. No study is flawless. And so there are always limitations and assumptions associated with studies. It is absolutely pivotal to read and read, specifically if you're targeting that journal. So a lot of what I publish is in the American Journal of Public Health. If I don't read the American Journal of Public Health, I don't know what's published. I don't know what style they like. I don't know what type of articles they'd like to publish. And so if I just go blindly and submit my paper to the American Journal of Public Health, the chances are extremely high that it will be rejected. Review what the journal's requirements are. What's the style of article? Is it a research article? Is it a perspective? Is it an essay? Is it an editorial? But a word for the wise, to the wise, for junior investigators and students. At this point in your career, focus on the research, a research article. Leave the editorials and the essays for people who are more mature in their career, like I am. So you need to do original research and publish it so that you can build your portfolio. I'll come back to the issue of the cover letter in a bit, but make sure you check whether a cover letter is needed. Make sure also you pay attention to the word limit. Nothing is as devastating if the word limit is 3,000 and your paper is at 6,000. Cutting is not fun. I mean, I do that almost for a living, but cutting is not fun. Make sure you know the number of figures, tables, and references allowed, and also in which style they want those figures, tables, and references published. Also, before you select a journal, make sure you are well aware of the fact of whether open access publishing is required. And in that case, it's called pay to play. So once your article is accepted, they say, well, good news, your article is accepted. We will continue with the review and publishing after you send us a check of $2,000. So if you don't have $2,000, then don't go to a journal where open access is required. Now, there are other journals where open access is optional. And so which is a clear peer-reviewed journal and open access is optional, then you don't have to, then you don't opt for open access. Now, how do you select a journal? Make sure you know about the journal's reputation. We'll talk about impact factor in a little bit. But if you're in your building career stage and you want to make sure your publications count, it's not only the number of publications, it's in which journal you're publishing. Now, at the beginning of your career, nobody will expect, I mean, it would be fantastic if you do, but nobody will expect that you will publish in a journal, just like New England Journal of Medicine or Science, or, I mean, if you do, it's absolutely great with an impact factor that is very high up there. But make sure you also don't select a journal that doesn't have an impact factor published or an impact factor, I would say, below 2. Relevance. Is the journal, are the topics that are published in the journal relevant to your topic? Now, your research, of course, is relevant to you, but it may not be relevant to the journal, and I'll come back to that. What type of publisher is that journal? As I talked about before, is it an open access publisher? Is it an optional publisher? So make sure you check on that. What's the publication model? Is it once a year? If you need to graduate or you need to get a grant and you need 2 papers published, and this publication only comes out once a year, then that's not a good publishing venue for you. So you need to pay attention to that. And how does your how does this journal publish their performance of the publication? So do you know, periodically, do they tell you how their publications are doing? So now let's talk a bit about performance metrics. They provide some insight metrics, but not the full picture. It gives you a window or a partial answer to the question, now, how much attention might my article get if I publish in this journal? So what's the overall reputation of the publication? Some of those metrics are valued more than other metrics, but you need to determine what's of value to you. In promotion and tenure reviews, people always look at the impact factor. Now, there are a lot of things to say about the impact factor, but people do look at that. But I'll come back to that. So what's the best fit for you, and what's the best fit for you and your study? So what do you want your track record to be with the journal? If you're selecting a journal and your intent is to publish more in that journal, then you want to make sure that the first time you engage with that journal, that you have your best foot forward. Sometimes metrics can obscure the value, so you need more than one metric, as I mentioned before. Think also about who you want to read your article. If you are going to apply for a postdoc position or a future faculty position, does the area where you're applying, do those readers or those peers, do they really read this journal? You know, if you are working on obesity or you are working on cardiovascular disease and those people only read cancer journals, first of all, are you applying in the right direction? And second, does your article fit in that particular journal? So here are some metrics that journals typically provide. The number of issues per year, I mentioned that. The acceptance rate. Here is another warning sign. If you need your article published rather quickly for other reasons, You want to look at their acceptance rate. For example, the American Journal of Public Health has an acceptance rate of 19%, which means that in 81% of the cases, you will be rejected. Now, is that the right journal for you right now? Or is it, do you have to think about where you're going next with this? So acceptance rate is important. Secondly, the evaluation speed. How long does it take from the time you submit your article to the time it's sent to peer review? Sometimes it's weeks in somewhat easier journals. Sometimes it's months in really top tier peer review journals. After peer review, there is another step, and that's time to publication, because let's say your article is accepted, but there are revisions, and sometimes there are multiple rounds of revisions. And so time to publication is also important. I currently have an article where the time to review has been over a year. And so there was no hurry with that article, but it's, for me, I wish that article was published before the grant ended. The grant has ended, but the article has not been published yet. So you need to take those things into account. You want to look at how much attention this particular journal gets. What are the number of web accesses or article downloads? What are the numbers of email alerts that people get because of a specific article in that journal? So let's talk a little bit about impact. The impact factor, it is available from Clarivate. The impact factor is about how often articles are cited. It measures the citation against the number of articles published. That's basically what it is. So the higher the impact factor, the more prominent the publication is. So to give you an example, New England Journal of Medicine, I think their impact factor is around 30. AJPH is around 5. EHP is around 5 or 6. And so, but there are also journals who are at 0.5 or 1.1 or 1.2. You might get a quicker publication out of those, but it's not a very high impact factor. Now, I'm not saying don't look at those journals. I am saying if you select those journals, the next time you publish, try to publish in a higher impact journal. But the impact factor is just one metric, it's not the only metric. And it's not necessarily indicative of how far the journal reaches and how often the journal is used. And yes, it does exist that some journals can manipulate their impact factor. Then here are some other metrics. Alt metric is becoming increasingly important and popular. It is capturing social media and traditional media and scholarly impact. So I'll give you an example in a bit. Another metric is SCImago, and I will talk about SCImago in a bit. And for promotion and tenure, often when we evaluate a person, and for other reasons as well, is the H index, and that's the author level metric. That's specific to you, not necessarily to the article. So alt metrics. It tracks performance on social media platforms, and then it generates a score for you and an overall picture of the reach of your article. It provides maps of comparison to track performance against other articles. The nice thing about altmetric is that it provides you real-time updates, and it looks at what the publisher has with what other metrics are. So here's an example of an altmetric. This was an article published by AJPH in 2018 about weaponized health communication. And it's specifically focused on Twitter bots and Russian trolls. And so on the right-hand side of your picture, you see the altmetric score, very high, 6440. And you can see it was picked up by 263 news media. It was blogged, it was tweeted 11,782 times. And so you could see how much publication this particular article has had. So that's what the altmetric score is, it will do for you. Saimago, on the other hand, is developed by Elsevier. It's based on the information in the Scopus database. It uses Google PageRank algorithms, and it gives you a greater idea of citation performance than actually of the impact factor. It does give you the H index. Remember, this is the individual index for the person. So what the Saimago ranking does is give you a prestige score. So bottom line on metrics by themselves just create a piece of the puzzle. You have to look at all the metrics together to get a real good look of the whole puzzle. Spend time investigating really only those that are relevant to your discipline. Some disciplines only focus on the impact factor. Some disciplines focus more on altmetrics. Some disciplines focus on all three. Publish their findings ultimately, so that your work can contribute to the knowledge base. Focus on the metrics, as I mentioned before, that really matter to you. So some strategies. I can't say enough to have your study design methods, data design of your writing team, and your authorship in place. It is the worst decision to determine authorship in the middle of writing, because people will fight with each other. It's incredible, but it happens. Senior authors will fight with each other. So make sure you make authorship decisions at the beginning, not in the middle, and definitely not at the end. Select early your journal or your article type so that you can write towards what is required. Develop a timeline and make writing assignments. Don't assume that somebody would write X part and that person doesn't do it. So make writing assignments, hold weekly or bi-weekly meetings to assess progress. Assure version control. The last thing you want is to have 10 different documents with track changes floating around in the cloud, and nobody knows which one the last version was. Have someone outside of the team read it. It's really critical. If you're writing around, cell biology, have somebody in English read it or in engineering read it, so that it makes sense for people not in your discipline. Make sure you have all required components that are ready for uploading, not only the body of your article. There are several journals that want the figures to be uploaded separately, and then they want another, abstract separately, and then they want a cover letter separately. And so make sure you have it all ready when you're going ahead to upload. Okay, so it happens to everybody. It happened to me too, not too long ago, that you get a rejection. But all is not lost. But why did you get a rejection? Here are the most frequent reasons for getting a rejection. The topic is relevant to you, as I mentioned before, but not to the journal. And I'll give you an example. My last rejection was, I think earlier this year, where I was forcing a journal article on plant health on the American Journal of Public Health, thinking that this was the year of plant health and the One Health approach, and gosh, public health should be thinking about the One Health approach. Well, it turned out that they had and I did my homework, I checked, and yes, there were only 2 or 3 articles around One Health or plant health published in AJPH. So I was self-warned that this might not work. But I thought I'm going to give it a try because this was a prestigious year of plant health. But it turned out that there were so many COVID-related articles that even if the editor-in-chief wanted to consider it, the importance of the moment for COVID articles far outweighed my plant health article. And so it's now going to a One Health journal and it's doing fine there. So make sure you know about that. there could be too many papers on the same topic. So if you are paper number 45 on COVID-19, you may not get in. The study type is not one of the journal publishes. So I'll talk about the editor-in-chief in a bit, but if the journal doesn't publish in vitro studies or in vivo studies, and that's what your topic is, then don't go there, they'll reject it. Improperly formatted for the format for the article type. So if you decide that you wanted to publish a research article, but it's your submission is formatted for an essay or a perspective, then it will be rejected. Improperly blinded if blinding is required. So some journals require that you submitted blindly so that the reviewers, some journals require that you submitted blindly so that the reviewers don't know who the authors were, so to keep impartiality. Or there is a high overlap of language from other published pieces. And believe me, the journal checks on that. Insufficient sample size is another reason. If you have a real low sample size and your denominator is low, the journal, even though the journal likes your topic, the journal might not accept it. The age of the data, this is really important. There are journals who will not take a publication using data that is older than 5 years. So specifically to students, don't sit on the data, publish. Because the older your data are, the less opportunity you have to publish in, particularly in high-tier journals. So don't sit on your data, analyze and publish it. Your findings and results are not statistically significant and cannot be generalized. So this is particularly for us in public health, for those of us in public health, this is a big issue, right? Because not always do you get statistical significance in some data, but it is, and you could say, well, why don't negative findings are good findings too, and they are, but typically journals will look for statistically significant findings. And findings that are not only relevant to your study population, and that's why the discussion section of an article is so critical. You want to demonstrate how your findings are relevant to another community, or to another community and to another situation. For example, if I publish about disasters, Hurricane X in Louisiana, I need to make the case that my publications and the findings can be relevant to a community in Florida, in Mississippi, in Alabama, or in Texas. So see if you can make that case. It is absolutely critical, and I'll come back to writing, that your message is focused and it's not too broad. I mean, if it is motherhood and apple pie, if it is saving the world, it's not interesting for the journal. And we talked about, again, it has to be truly applicable to the publication in your discipline. But the rejection can also be an opportunity. It means that you want to sit back and particularly if you get peer reviews, if you get back, and use the feedback. It's just like your grant not being funded, but you get the critiques. Use the feedback to improve your work, and that it will increase your likelihood of going to somewhere else. Sometimes, in the case of my rejected article on plant health, the editor-in-chief was nice enough and sent me at least 7 or 8 other journals that I should try my publication in, which I did, and it worked out fine. But I really wanted it in that particular journal. But that's my wish, and that's not what he decided. Because if it is a good article, it will be accepted. And, you know, and again, in my plant health article, it's accepted and it will be published soon. So we talked about rejection, we talked about very prestigious journals. And if you remember my opening, my title slide, I had 3 journals up there: New England Journal of Medicine, The Lancet, and the American Journal of Public Health, all very prestigious journals. But things go wrong even in the best of circumstances and in the highest classes of journals. Here is one that I wanted to share with you, a retraction. Actually, a retraction from 2 of the journals, both the Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine. And I'm sharing some quotes with you, and you see the link to the article, and I really encourage you to read it. 2 co-authors to the Lancet, the retraction in the Lancet said, our independent peer reviewers informed us that this is a company, Surgisphere, wouldn't transfer the full data set for review, and therefore we're retracting it. So this was about, you remember hydroxychloroquine and the hoopla around whether or not it would work for COVID. And so this was a highly sought article about that, and saying that yes, it seemed to be working, but when the journals and when some of the authors asked this particular author who was holding the data, who had the data, to share it so that the data could be reviewed, he claimed that he couldn't share it because of confidentiality requirement. Because of that, 2 of the authors requested a retraction from the Lancet. In the case of the New England Journal of Medicine, the New England Journal of Medicine directly retracted it and said because all the authors were not granted access to the raw data, this is the same issue, could not, and because it wasn't available from this third party, for a third party auditing, we are unable to validate the primary data sources, and therefore they actually issued an apology because in both cases, the article was already published. They issued an apology to the readers and retracted it. So retractions do happen when data are either not validated or falsified. Okay, so a series of quick trips. I'm cognitive of the time here. Does the journal publish on your topic? We talked about that. Look at the last 3 years of your of the journal and see whether indeed is a topic that is connected to your topic, that they publish on a topic that is connected to your topic. Look at what the editor-in-chief, if there was a change in the editor-in-chief. During my 2 terms as chair of the editorial board of the American Journal of Public Health, we had a change in editorial editor-in-chief, and it very significantly changed the scope and the focus of the journal. So make sure you check on that. Make sure, you know, you want to make sure you see if the journal really likes your topic, so that, and if your topic, even if the journal likes your topic, if the topic is really one of priority. So again, my plant health example, even if they wanted to take that, COVID was a much higher priority. We talked about only a few articles. If there are a bunch of topics on a specific, a bunch of articles on a specific topic, it might be with a special, it might be related to a special issue that's really focused. So be mindful of that as well. Types of studies we talked about. If you have a negative study, are negative studies published, or only statistically significant studies are published? Are there secondary data analyses published as an article, or only primary data novel studies? We talked about the age of your data. Read, we talked about the importance of reading, and in this case, reading the article instructions, the cover letter format, the submission instruction, read that. Copyright, understand that, understand what you're signing. You're going to have to sign a copyright agreement. Sometimes you don't have, you relinquish your access to the to the article once it's published. So read what that copyright agreement says before you sign. Formatting, we talked a lot about formatting and word count and citation limits and how citation style. We talked about double blind. You know, in this case, you give it a name that is not, that people can trace back to you. Messaging, this is critical. Put your reader hat on. I really encourage you to read your article out loud. The minute you stumble on a paragraph or a sentence, you know the reader will be doing the same thing. If it's boring to you, it's definitely boring to the reader. Share your draft, as I talked about before. Visit either the Office of Research or any Office of Research or your department where you have help in writing. If you have an English major friend, let that person read it and ask a colleague to read as well. Cover letter. It is your first impression. It is what you open the door with. If your cover letter has typos, if your cover letter is not concise, if your cover letter does not have all the aspects that are required in the cover letter, that article will be rejected even before the peer review, the editors read your article. It will be rejected just because your cover letter didn't follow the instructions. So here is an example. The American Journal of Public Health asks for a 150-word cover letter. And they want 3 things addressed in that cover letter. How your paper contributes to the current knowledge base. What's the importance of your paper to the field of study? And what's the main message and highlight of your study? They use this to publicize your article. So if you can't say it in a sentence, then they can't say it for you either. So in summary, do research on your journal, the journal that you want to target. Make sure you review the metrics. Read the journal where you want to publish before you publish in it. Read all the instructions and ask questions. And so one of the things you always should do when you present is thank the people who contributed to, in whatever way, to what you're doing. So I really want to thank Brian Seltzer. He's the Deputy Director of Publications for the American Public Health Association. I've worked very closely with him on many of these issues when I was chair of the editorial board. I want to thank the entire RCR staff, Lisa, Tim, and Kay for their support. You don't know, but behind the scenes, we've been working for months and months to get to this place, and it all seems seamless, but it's because of their hard work. So thank you. I will stop sharing, and then we can have some dialogue.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lichtfeld. Do people have questions? You can either type them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask them. So please take advantage of this wonderful opportunity while we have Dr. Lichtfeld for a few more minutes.
It could not have been this clear, so, because usually I take a lot more time to go over this. We don't have all that time.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, Bunny.
Thank you so much. So I would like some perspectives from you as a faculty member, how doctoral students can approach faculty in a way to say, we've contributed to research, but maybe we're not included in the manuscript portion of the research. So how can we go about having that conversation and dialogue? Because really we've contributed a lot, but we don't always get that recognition.
First of all, that's unethical. And you can quote me for that. Secondly, I think if you be very concise about document what you contributed, and then I would not have a meeting. I would actually send an email and then have a meeting. And that way you've documented it. And I wouldn't only send it to the investigator or to your professor, I would send it to everybody else who contributed so that you have support. But that's what I would do.
Thank you.
Don't be shy. You should be a co-author.
There's actually a question in the chat from a BMS student. It says, what can you do if someone is trying to get authorship on a paper and didn't do any work?
You don't include that person. And remember, I started in the beginning saying that because I have experienced that from other students, not my students, in other institutions. That's why you want to make those decisions beforehand. And even if it's the chair of your dissertation committee or the professor that you work with in his or her lab, be very clear that actually ask, have them, just like I shared with Bonnie, have them document for you what it is they did. Because that's exactly what, and you are in 100% full right to say, because I have to communicate that to the journal. So if you tell me what you've concretely done, then yes, we will consider you in the authorship, but you'd have to document and we have to prove it to the journal that you have concretely contributed to the article.
We have another question in the chat. When first starting your career, do you recommend submitting to lower impact journals first and work your way up, or encourage a shoot for the stars approach?
This is a good one, and Allison has a question too in a bit. I recommend to start in lower impact journals, but not too low. So if you could hover around 2, the impact factor of 2, that's a good start. And then work yourself up. Now, if you have fantastic research and you're going right to Science or Cell or, New England Journal of Medicine, boy, fantastic. But what you don't want to have is then have a long gap, because you want to have, at this point, the number of publications is also important, not only where you publish. That one article in the New England Journal of Medicine will count for a long time, but they won't. One is really nothing, the rest on the rest of that page, right, of the CV. So you want to start in a lower impact journal because also it helps you train. It's a training, kind of a training step, just like, in your master's or doctoral program, you do your theory first before you, go into the research. So you want to start with a lower impact journal. You want to start maybe being not the first author if you're not the first author. So if your professor is publishing and he or she is ethical and you help do the research in the lab or the analysis, statistical analysis, then you will be a co-author, maybe not the first author. So you start that way and then ultimately you work your way up to being that first author. Allison, you had a question.
Mine is more about like mentor status. What do you recommend doing to try to find a mentor that not only is specific in what you're interested in the research field, but also in those supplemental ways to develop?
That's a really good question, Allison. My style and my recommendation is a triad of mentors. So 3 people. One is the one in your field. So if you're doing X, the professor in X. The second person is the person who looks actually in the trajectory of where you're going. Still in your field, but not specifically in that smaller portion of your discipline. And the third person is that overall career mentor. And for many of my junior faculty and my PhD students, I am sometimes both the kind of the technical nitty-gritty one, but primarily more the career mentor. And so your career mentor doesn't have to be in your field. I have mentors. They're of course no longer in a university, or and some of them are at the university, but they're no longer teaching or so on. So I have career mentors that I always consult when I make difficult decisions. And so that's what I would do. I would look for that kind of career, the three people that not often do you have all three people in one person, all three types of mentoring in one person. So look for that. I'd be happy to have some more conversation with you on that. And Lisa, you said there was a question in the chat.
Yes, one more question here. Could you tell us about how to organize our data in the results table?
Okay. The first thing I would say is that I'm not a biostatistician, that's number one. Secondly, therefore, my best friend is a biostatistician. I do nothing without a biostatistician. And so make sure your biostatistics professor is your best friend. And so that's the second advice. In terms of how to organize things in a results table, typically you begin with, for population studies, descriptive statistics. Make sure, and then you go into the deeper analysis. If you do basic research, biomedical research, then you present the data as you get it. What is important is this. Do not have tables with 67 variables. Nobody will read that. Make sure you have p-values, you have, if you're using other tests, make sure you articulate that. Make sure you don't throw, and a lot of students are doing that, they just throw 6 tables in the results section and they think they're done. No, because I want to see how you have analyzed it, one, so description in your analysis plan, and two, what the data mean. And so you need to describe the results to me. The third thing is be mindful of what is more presentable in a table versus what's more presentable in a figure. Sometimes a figure is much clearer than a bunch of cells in a table. And so think about that as well. And there was one more in the chat. Oh, no, I think that was it. Other questions? I think we're at the end, but I'm happy to stay on if there are a few more questions. And Liz, feel free to give out my email. I'd be happy to answer questions afterwards.
All right, and last call for questions before we wrap it up for today.
I have a question. How many of you are currently working on a manuscript? You are, Bunny, you are. Good. Who else is working on a manuscript? Aha. Anna, so Anna, tell me about your manuscript.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi.
Hi.
The Goldring Center down the street on Broad, and I've been collecting primary data for the past couple of years on a program that I run, like a nutrition intervention program with kids. So it's like pre-post intervention, all qualitative data, and I'm working on the manuscript for that right now as part of my thesis.
And which journal are you targeting?
Public Health Nutrition.
Okay, good. What's the impact factor?
That I do not know.
Aha, so there's homework to be done. Very good. But at least you've looked at how they lay out what it is they want, how they want you to lay out the article?
Yes, I was a third author on a paper submitted to them through the Goldring Center last year. So I'm familiar with what they prefer as far as layout.
Good, good, very good. And so Ana Peralta, you had a paper as well, right? Did I see that correctly?
Yes, I am writing a manuscript right now too.
No?
Yes, I am writing one.
I can't hear you. Increase your volume.
Hello.
Anna?
Can you hear me now?
No, barely. Can't hear you. So try to work on your volume. But Meredith, you have one in review. Tell us about that one.
I came into the right time for a summer rotation at the Primate Center. And so they already had most of the work done, but I got to tackle some analysis and help with some of the writing, and we got to submit it. We actually submitted to Nature because it's some COVID research. That's a first report, and we're waiting for some response on the third review, but it's looking pretty good.
Great. So do you have you had a first round back?
I think she just told me that we got, I think, the first two reviewers' comments back, but we're waiting for the third.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, good. So Nature, that's a pretty big deal, pretty high impact journal, and that's great for you to be able to do that. My son did an internship in the summer at the Private Center. The Private Center is pretty good in making sure students publish. That's excellent.
Yes.
Good. Lisa, I don't see any. Okay, Anna Peralta's writing a message. Let's see. Cross-cultural adapting of instruments. Okay, in the RCT, very good. And so I work a lot in South America and Latin America. So if you want to connect, let me know. Lisa, back to you.
All right, Dr. Litchfield, thank you very, very much. This is a fascinating topic and a lot of really good practical information for everyone today. So we thank you very, very much. Right, we will see everyone again next week, same place, same time. If you have questions in the meantime, reach out to us on email. You can also find our telephone number on our website. So we will see you all next week. Thanks and bye.
Great, do good work. Bye-bye.